Hello, I'm Dave March, the Spy Guy, and I've come in here today. Oh God, why is that so off there? Anyways, my green screen's a little screwing up there. And of course, my hair. I went out for a walk, and I got the toque hair, so there's that as well. But yeah, and I've been working on an in-video AI, trying to get a 30-second video intro. The one I generated the first time came off a little documentary, a little too much. So I was like, no, I need to screw around with the parameters a bit more and learn how to generate what I want. I want to have spies and Cold War gear doing stuff, and instead it was kind of like goofy historical things, and it's like, then I'll tell you something about this. I'm like, that's not what the format is here. So basically ending with the Spy Guy in that regard. Yeah, so we're going to do a very long video here. I'm going to probably do another one afterwards for redacted reaction, because they had one on with the guy, one of the guys from MUFON, which is like one of the UFO groups, and we have all this interesting speculation going on with the UFOs. And of course, my Arctic Yahtzee video turned out to be quite a little bit more popular than some of the other content. And we're trying to get some things going. But once again, we are going to go on to, I got this from Deep Dive with Daniel Davis, but this is actually an interview being done on another show called Countercurrents, which is done by Larry Johnstone. So I'll present, and we'll see the little banner they have about being on the reverse side of things.
Countercurrents. I'm Larry Johnson, and today I'm privileged to have Danny Davis of Deep Dive with me. And hopefully his producer, Gary Villapiano, joins us as well. We're going to talk about how they got started, but then turn to a discussion about what's the future of the war in Ukraine. Where are we headed? Stay tuned, hit the like and subscribe button. Thanks for watching. Okay, we're now live. This is called Turn the Tables, because normally Danny Davis is grilling me. Today I get to grill Danny Davis.
Yeah, I don't like being on the grill, man.
Yeah. Well, actually, you and I both share a love for that Korean barbecue grill. You know,
we do. As a matter of fact, Honey Pig. Yeah, I'm just my favorite. I'm taking my whole family there here coming up pretty soon. So we
I gotta say, Korean barbecue is pretty good.
Love it.
Yeah, we an undiscovered jewel in Northern Virginia. So I want to, we'll talk a little bit about the war, but I want, I want at least the people that watch my channel, hopefully they're watching your channel, Danny Davis Deep Dive. But for those that haven't, I want them to understand your background in terms of how you went from the war in Iraq to the war in Afghanistan and what you learned along the way.
Yeah, I learned a lot of things, some tactical and some complete.
And I didn't know this until today. I thought he was just an armored guy or special forces, but turns out he worked for a long time in the DIA as well, Daniel Davis. So that's kind of something I learned today while watching this video. And so it makes it more important now to pay more attention to him, because we're getting from like CIA, Larry Johnson, DIA, Daniel Davis.
Completely off the battlefield that were very painful lessons. In terms of the Iraq war, I mean, I could tell real quick. By the time I got there in 2009, now I'd fought in the Desert Storm, so back in 1991 in the maneuver phase, I guess if you want to call it that. But in terms of the Iraq war, I didn't actually get on the ground there until 2009. So most of the fighting had been done by then.
Right.
And in fact, I was there to lead a military training contingent. We were training an Iraqi border battalion on the border between Iraq and Iran, training them how to do combat operations, etc., as part of this whole thing that the U.S. was doing to mentor and all that. One of the things that just was painfully obvious from the day one and all the way through was that the Iraqis had no interest in learning anything, but the government said, you're going to host this American crew, they're going to do training. Our command said, you're going to do the training, you're going to host them, even though everyone knew that no one really cared anything about that. And to the Iraqis, it was kind of like, adventure training. They're like, we've been doing this for decades, our whole life. Basically, we kind of know how to do border patrol operations.
Right.
Sure, come on over. Drank a lot of tea. And we did conduct a lot of training, but it was just a product of futility that had no value. And this idea that we were training the Iraqi military and making them better was always a fraud. And by the way, I was one of, I want to say it was 20 some odd, it was a cohort of 20 some odd training teams that trained at a U.S. base before we deployed for about 3 months. And then we all just, spread out across, police battalions, army battalions, border battalions, et cetera, all across the country. And when we assembled back together to leave to go back to the United States, all my fellow team chiefs, one of which I was, had nearly the identical experience, that it was a complete waste of time.
I'm sure it was some general got promoted from this complete waste of time and money, but yeah.
And yet, Larry, when I see all the comments and all these statements, when people go and testify before Congress, or when they go and talk to our media, they talk about how much the Iraqi army was advancing and how much they were benefiting from this, et cetera. And there was literally it was just a facade. So that was really wonderful.
Yeah, I remember watching back on Lou Dobbs on CNN. And to tell you guys who did not grow up in this area, one time the most Trumpiest network would have been CNN. Like, this was before Donald Trump, during the Bush era. Under Lou Dobbs tonight, you would have this programming block of 3 to 4 hours until you got to Larry King, where you just had this very Trumpy thing. There's like war on the border and all this stuff that was pre-Trump, what Trump was talking about, all this populism. And then CNN gets taken over by a new guy, buys out Lou Dobbs, and it all goes away, and it becomes the lefty trash network we know for it now. But at one time, they stopped the Saudis from buying a port deal, and that's when they got taken out.
Kind of a waste of a lot of time, but that's what we did.
Well, at the time, if we're building up the Iraqi army, we're building them up for what? Who are they going to fight? Iran? Or was it their own people? Did that topic ever come up?
Well, it kind of did. I mean, now my particular group was on the border, so with Iran. But I mean, the idea that Iran would ever attack was just nonsensical. So that was really never an issue. All we were doing was basically saying, here's border patrol techniques in case for people coming across the border illegally, et cetera. But as we discovered, a lot of the border crossing was actually condoned by the government in illegal transit and whatnot back and forth across, that they actually help facilitate, not block. But other people said, it was the internal security and the terrorists like the ISIS or any other groups that turned out to probably be Sunnis from the Shia led the security forces in very many cases. And certainly we know that's what happened, because once 2 years later, when President Obama took us out, then all of this training that we did was used by the Iraqi security forces against the Sunnis inside their country. And then that metastasized into ISIS. It's not that they went and attacked ISIS, it's that they attacked the Sunnis, who then became ISIS out of necessity. And
yeah, like that. What a cluster thing event there. I remember being at Connections after Mosul fell, and everyone was like really worried. And they're like, well, they've captured this giant amount of tanks and weapons and stockpile because, the Shia government didn't trust their Sunni army. So they deliberately kept they limited the amount of weapons and material that they could have access to. Like, they couldn't have more than so many rounds in their tank guns. And of course, it's Arabs, so they're running half the army's it doesn't exist. It's just ghost soldiers getting paid so the officers can collect the money. Like, this is stuff that goes back thousands of years. And Christians did this kind of stuff too. The Byzantines were notorious for that.
thanks to some of the training I guess we gave. I don't know it was really improved anything, but
Oh, and that's what I wanted to say. So these guys were like, oh, well, at least they can't use any of this stuff. And I'm like, all the manuals are in Arabic. You've been training these guys on how to drive all these tanks. And they're like, oh, and these guys are like high-powered military analysts.
that's who it ended up getting used against.
All right, folks, hold on just a second. We've got something important to share with you. First off, a big thank you for all your incredible support. Our team's been putting in the hours, really working hard to bring you insightful guests, new and improved formats, solid, high-quality analysis every week. Our next goal?
Normally, I skip over other people's commercials, but this is this guy's own personal commercial, and I'm using his stuff, so I don't mind showing it to you.
Hitting that 100,000 subscriber mark and getting that silver button. Let's make it happen together. Every like, comment, share, and subscription truly helps us grow and keep improving. All right then, let's get back to the video.
Did your cohorts at the time have an understanding of the difference between Sunni and Shia?
We did, yeah. That was a part of that 3 months training we had before we left. So we were at least as much as you can get in a survey of a few months. I mean, we were told about the cultural differences and how you actually engage with them or whatever, and limited language capabilities, et cetera. Thanks and sorry, whatever. But I mean, you're not going to get much in that period of time. But there was a basic understanding.
Yeah, because in the early days after 9/11, working with JSOC, they didn't, if they're Muslim, one Muslim, same as another Muslim, no difference, Sunni, Shia, who cares?
Yeah.
And so at least by, 8 years later, it evolved where it was, the knowledge was getting out. So then what got you into Afghanistan?
So now I had written a document. I for a short period of time, I was temporarily assigned duty to Defense Intelligence Agency in 2009. And as a product of being there, turned out that's when President Obama, after this alleged leak from what's his name, the U.S. General,
McChrystal,
the one that said
Crystal.
McChrystal, yeah, Stan McChrystal.
Stan McChrystal.
If my God, if we don't have this big surge of troops, we're going to lose the war, and they're going to overwhelm us and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, Stan McChrystal, fun guy. So he gets taken out by Max Hastings, I believe it is, the guy who dies under very mysterious circumstances. Some say by his car careening off the road into a tree. And all this speculation, especially after the revelations about the CIA being able to hack people's cars. There's a lot of people expecting that. But I'm just like, he did end the career of the head of JSOC, the head of the Special Forces. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm just pointing out there was someone else out there with a different motive.
And so that leak turned into Obama saying, okay, well, maybe we need to give this. And so there was this big debate, public debate, that we needed, 30 or 40,000 more troops, et cetera. And I had, while I was still working at the DIA, published an unclassified document, I guess it was about a 60-page report that said, it was called Go Big or Go Deep. And I said, if we go big, it's going to be a disaster. If we give McChrystal what he's asking for, it's almost certainly going to fail. And for these reasons, they weren't hard to figure out. They all panned out. But I said, I just don't think this is going to work. We should instead go deep. If you want to do something, go small and help the Afghanistan troops or whatever defend their own country. Of course, we know that on December 1st, 2009, Obama made the call and said, no, we're going to go big instead. And I just said, okay, well, let's see what happens.
Yeah, you got to remember at this time, Obama had run on we were fighting the wrong war. Iraq was the wrong war. We want to win in Afghanistan. It's the good war. That was criticism there. So that's for some of the younger folks who don't remember that was what was happening at the time. So there was a lot of pressure to make Afghanistan work because that's what the Democrats had run on.
And then at the first of the year in 2010, we had, a government in a box. that was going to be working. And you remember Marjaw? That was kind of the first test case, and that was proven how all of these ideas, now that we have the right inputs that McChrystal and Petraeus said, now we got the inputs right. So now things are going to go and start getting better. And then Petraeus said, well, you know, as it turns out, we have arrested the momentum of the Taliban in many areas and reversed it in others, but it's still tentative. It's still fragile, but we're moving in the right azimuth. Things are going in the right direction, and so things are succeeding. And I was still in Washington, D.C. at the time, and I thought, I guess I was wrong. I mean, I suppose if that's the way it's going to work, then, I mean, if it's going to bring the war over, it's going to succeed. I guess I'm glad to be proven wrong. I was afraid this would happen in this direction, but cool. And then I came down on orders that I was going to go as the chief of the Rapid Equipping Force to go to Afghanistan. And I thought, terrific. If this stuff is working, I'd love to be on the ground as it's wrapped up. I'm thinking if Petraeus is telling the truth, and why wouldn't he? He's a four-star general talking to
Why would anyone lie? He's a four-star general. He's a hero of Iraq. I mean, what was his clever plan in Iraq when he was a division commander? He hired like a bunch of unemployed Iraqis to clean the streets and to do maintenance and do all this stuff. So he got all these people jobs. So the crime went down to nothing. Great plan, actually. It's not a terrible idea. And of course, as soon as he's rotated out, the next division commander comes in, and or even before his term's up, they fire all the Iraqis and bring in tens of thousands of contractors from Sri Lanka or something like that. It was ridiculous. Oh, Bangladeshi. He brought in tens of thousands of Bangladeshi to replace the Iraqis who were no longer committing terrorist attacks because they all had jobs. That's the kind of stuff that we get out of these idiots. I'm not talking about these two. I'm talking about the four-star generals.
Congress under oath.
I give you lots of reasons why, but okay.
Yeah, I'll provide them myself here in a minute. But at the time, I thought, you can't lie, on something that brazen. So it must be true. I mean, I didn't even hardly think about it. I thought, well, if he's telling the truth and they have all these metrics, then okay, I want to be part of wrapping this thing up and seeing a successful conclusion, the war come to an end, Afghanistan be able to live in peace and its people be free of war. So that's cool. I want to get there. Well, when I finally got deployed in about October of that year is when I first landed on the ground. It didn't take long at all for me to discover that, holy snap, everything Petraeus had said was a lie. Not some of it. He wasn't exaggerating. He was just full cloth making stuff up. And the more I went out, and by the way, my job required me. I had a couple of different headquarters that I bounced between Kandahar and Bagram. And then I also had smaller elements that I literally went throughout the entire country, everywhere that there was Army brigades. I think 11 of them over the time that over my year there. I went out on talked to the division commanders, brigade commanders, battalion, company commanders, platoon leaders, and guys on patrol point. So, I mean, I literally went everywhere because my job was to find out what these guys needed, like right now that they don't have, and we can't go through all the long process of the acquisition program, et cetera. So I was supposed to find out what they need to get it to them quickly. So that required me to go to the front lines everywhere. And I could see just the absurdity of what we were doing, and the lies of not just the Petraeus, but even some of the division commanders who, when things happened on the ground there, then they would characterize them in a way to the media that were a flat out lie, that they knew was a lie, that I knew was a lie because I was on the ground. I was talking to the guys doing it. I was on the patrols, and it just infuriated me. And the more, it's one thing, Larry, to you're lying, and just as a professional, it's unethical and immoral, whatever, because you're supporting a war that would otherwise probably not be fought if people knew the truth of it. No one would support something that was so self-evidently failing. But when American troops are getting killed as a result, and there was a couple of particular issues that drove me to come in public with all this, is I think we've talked about before, is that one, there was a big operation we did near the Pakistan border that resulted in a lot of Americans getting killed and wounded. One of the bigger casualty producers of the war. It wasn't a huge one, but it was bigger than most. And when I heard the division commander tell the public that this was a painful operation, and I have these little cards that I have with the names of the soldiers that died. I keep it close to my chest, because it's a wound for me. But these guys died for something. What they did meant something, etc. And he calculated what it was. Well, I knew, because I had access to classified information, so I can't divulge the details of any of this stuff even now. But I knew that, number one, publicly, because it was out there, we had done an operation, I think it was 9 months earlier, in the exact same spot that also had a lot of American and Iraqi Afghan National Guard casualties. That was a complete disaster. We were supposed to have taken out a Taliban area and then handed it over to the Afghan military to now maintain this location here, so that you move the Taliban back, and then you put the new Afghan government, then maybe later on you would move further, etc., and continue to drive the Taliban out. But instead, the minute that we left after all this combat operation, the Taliban issued threats to the Afghan troops that said, if y'all stay, we're going to come kill you. And they ran away. They ran away. All the stuff we'd put in there, all the equipment that we'd give them, they just stripped it dry.
Of course. Like the solution to Afghanistan was the monarchy, but Americans don't do monarchy, so I guess that didn't work. Or Islam, that's the other solution. That's not going to work, because that's what the Taliban are. And what they needed to do was to just find someone, put them in charge, slap them enough money to bribe all the people that they needed to bribe to keep everything calm. And America and NATO should have left. This is what the British learned after 2 Afghan wars. The first Afghan war, they get wiped out, is like one of the craziest stories ever, where they last 3 guys coming through the Khyber Pass, and they're the rest of the army is all 30,000 men are dead. 3 guys stumble out of the Khyber Pass a year later. The second time, the British get there under old Bob Roberts there, and gets in old Roberts, and they capture Kabul, and they're like, we need to get the hell out of here. We're surrounded. There's only 40,000 of us. Sure, we took the capital, but we don't want to be like Napoleon. So they found someone to be king and just said, look, we'll leave. You just have to keep these guys from attacking India all the time. Drive down the raids, and we'll pay you to keep these guys under control. And that worked up until the 1970s, when the Soviets started screwing around.
And ran away, and the Taliban rolled right back in as though no one had ever there. So already we had sacrificed troops for no reason. So now we go back in, but this time, Larry, it was worse, because we didn't even pretend we were going to leave the Afghan national troops there. We just had another big operation, killed a bunch of Taliban, probably like 5 to 6 to 1 in terms of how many were killed. I think I want to say it was 14 or 18. I can't remember the exact number that we had killed and wounded on our side. And maybe 100 Taliban killed. So it was 10 to 1 at least, or something close to that. But then we just got back on our helicopters and left. The Taliban rolled right back in, and it was as though we had never been there. So when you're telling American people that our boys died for something important and it made a difference, it made no difference, and you knew it didn't make a difference, right, and you lied. And so that's when I said, your lies are now costing American troops their lives. And
yeah, sounds like so much of what happened in Vietnam. We just attacked this hill 3 weeks ago. Why are we attacking it again?
That is just immoral, not just unethical. And then, as it turned out, so I was already getting angry. That was relatively early. And then in that summer, went on another patrol down in the Kandahar area, in the Arghandab valleys, to be specific, and met some troops down there. And I'll remember the staff sergeant that led the patrol. While we were actually setting up a new forward position near the river, and so there was had been a big firefight the day before, and they'd driven the Taliban out of a building complex. So we were going in the next day to set up machine gun positions and everything else, and that was the new forward position for our side. And I remember him pointing out to a couple of guys over there. See these two? There's two specialists, E4s, And, they said these guys are really doing a great job, and really proud of him, because this one kid was in trouble and had done some stuff, but he had made up for it, and, took responsibility, and now he's really making something of himself and all this kind of stuff. And then it wasn't a month later that I'm back at my headquarters going to the chow hall in Bagram, and I see the Stars and Stripes headline, and it just said, this huge headline, it just said, "They're all dead." And there's a picture of a mangled MRAP vehicle, so armored vehicle. And, and of course that's like, oh man, here's another one. But then I start reading it, and I realized that all 5 of the people that were killed, because those MRAPs are supposed to take the brunt of this, and it said all 5 had been killed. And then I looked at the names, and it was 2 of those kids. 2 of the 5 that were killed were 2 of the kids I had met. That made it now personal. And again, I know that these people are dying for no reason, because, and it turned out this way, as soon as their tour was over, that brigade redeployed out, and they withdrew from the positions, and the Taliban rolled right back in. So all of these deaths have no impact on the war at all. We're just throwing the lives away of our men. You can go down the path, Larry, of all the money that we spend, and the billions of dollars and all this kind of stuff. Apparently, including $45 million even today, but maybe we'll talk about that later. But that's what was going on then. We lose the money, and we're losing our troops, and then we're lying about the whole thing. And of course, all of this boils down to exactly what I'd been warning about all the way through, that to the 2009, back in 2009, I said, we will lose this war if we don't make some substantive changes. And I chronicled what they were. We didn't make the changes, and then that's exactly what happened in 2021. What a surprise. It's not hard if you're just willing to look at reality on the ground and be honest. But we weren't, and so I was pretty aggravated about that. Came out and went public with it.
Yeah, well, you got to remember, like, you're not going to get promoted unless you got battles to fight, right?
When I came back, the New York Times covered it. I published it in the Armed Forces Journal at the time, and not a very popular person.
You weren't well received.
What's that?
You weren't well received.
I wasn't.
Let's promote him. He's a great guy.
Yeah, they wanted to promote me to the bottom of the sea, I think. But what wasn't in any of the newspaper articles or anything that came out at the time was that my job after I came back, I was reassigned as a liaison officer between the Rapid Equipping Force and the Army leadership. So I was in the Pentagon, in the office where all the generals are. So if you know anything about the Whistleblower Protection Act, they can't take any action against you if you come forward and make an allegation of.
Well, they can't fire you, but you won't be going up higher than 05 at this point. He was light colonel. He's no longer on the general's track. If he was ever on the general's track, I have no idea. But he probably could have retired to colonel. He should have done in full bird. And by coming out as a whistleblower, that killed that.
Some sort, and blow the whistle. So they couldn't move me out, but I was like a literal pariah.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember one particular time, a full week where no one would speak to me at all, because now that I'm like radioactive, so nobody wants to be seen talking to me in public. It's
like after Khrushchev fell, one of the agriculture ministers in the government after Khrushchev was removed went to one of Khrushchev's birthdays, and that guy was also out of power afterwards. That's how radioactive you can be in these bureaucracies.
Wouldn't even give me any work to do, so there's nothing for me to liaise between, because no one wanted to even talk to me, and so they made my life as miserable as it can be. And I'll just give you one little example that's just kind of petty, but kind of gives you a sense of it. I'm walking down a corridor one time, who knows, I was coming back from lunch or something, and it was in the wintertime, and I had one of those jackets that you have with it's a black jacket, had a zip up with where was your Class B uniform, and the zipper was I guess somewhere around here. Well, apparently, according to the exact terms of the Army regulations on clothing, it was supposed to be something like here. So it was, I don't know, three inches or something too low, and this one particular general officer who specifically just seethed every time the name of Daniel Davis was mentioned. saw me, and he just like stopped me, it just dressed me down in one side and down to the other, and said, you're not a professional, and get that uniform back up there according to regular, whatever. So they couldn't do any of those things, but they did stuff like that to make my life a literal living hell until I was able to get out. About 6 months later, they reassigned me elsewhere in Washington, D.C. So, and then I just stayed there until I retired. So they kind of put me out to pasture, and no one was happier about that than the generals. And right next to that, I was happy about moving out. But that's my tale.
Having studied our effort in Vietnam, a lot of what you're going through sounds like deja vu all over again.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Too many analogies now.
Yeah, so we always, you've been in enough exercises that at the end of exercises, they have the hot wash where we talk about lessons learned. And I remember when I first started, doing the exercises in 1994. So, there I was in my, late 30s, early 40s, naive thinking, wow, this is great. We're going to do these exercises and people are going to learn and get better. 20 years later, I knew it was, it's a flat line, declining line. Nobody's learning a damn thing. And
I don't know about your experience, but very oftentimes in mine, we actually put a lot of effort when I was on active duty into these hot washes and into these after action reports. And it's like, we really, this is good stuff there, but no one ever read it.
Yeah.
So it goes into a file. And I'm like, what about all the ones that have been done the 20 years previously? How come I've never seen one of those? Shouldn't we be studying those about what has already been learned? But yeah, they never get used.
It's like that scene from the end of the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they packaged up the Ark of the Covenant in a box and they're moving it into this enormous warehouse. They're just going to stick it somewhere. It's so important. We're going to file it away where nobody will ever see it.
It's going to be studied by top scientists.
Top men.
Who? Top. And then it goes into the abyss and never to come out again.
Yeah. So
it may still be there for all we know.
Well, I'm detecting a pattern here. We saw the same tendency of our frontline commanders in Vietnam to tell one kind of story that was completely divorced from reality. I mean, it even led to a lawsuit with General Westmoreland. Yeah. Sorry, my dog is going crazy. General Westmoreland going against one of my mentors at CIA, a fellow named George Allen. Not the football coach for the Washington Redskins, but this George Allen was the chief of the Southeast Asia Division. And so he was in charge of all the analysis over the Vietnam War. And the basic issue where there was Westmoreland and company were reporting the tremendous body counts of, man, we're killing this many.
Reminds me of a movie called The Boys in Company C. And the guys are all... officer, it's a movie set in Vietnam about this company, and finally, the lieutenant who's leading his men on this patrol, someone gets shot, and he's like, "Screw this noise," and he says, he turns to, the captain, and turns to the lieutenant, or the lieutenant turns to the sergeant. "Sergeant, what do you see in that field?" "I see nothing, sir." "Really? You know what I see? I see an entire NVA regiment down there, and they're getting ready to deploy. So call the Air Force up and let them know." And so the next scene cuts, and the Air Force is strafing the hell out of this empty field because the troops down below are reporting that there's 1,000 Viet Cong in the area, and because the entire time they're on these stupid patrols, they're getting lambasted because they don't have a high enough body count, because they're only encountering random snipers. So as soon as they report they killed an NVA regiment via the Air Force, their body count went up and they got to go play soccer, which is what they wanted to do instead. It's just, and why wouldn't you lie if you wanted to get promoted? Why wouldn't you want to lie to get to this stuff? Who's going to argue with you? I have another story like that I'll share some other time.
Viet Cong and this North Vietnamese, and there's no way that they're going to be able to mount an offensive. This is before Tet. And turned out, the CIA kept saying, hey, these numbers, it's not correct. Now, Allen had a guy working for him by the name of Sam Adams, not the Sam Adams of the American Revolution or the beer company.
So many, yeah.
But this Sam Adams was, he had he was an analyst. He had also been in the military. He'd been on the ground in Vietnam. He'd been on the ground in Vietnam. He was, he spoke the language, so he knew. And most important of all, he was a millionaire. He came from a wealthy family. So it was called fuck you money, because as George Allen explained the kind of pressure he was coming under, he was getting phone calls from the National Security Advisor, McGeorge Bundy, Robert McNamara, the Secretary of Defense. And he said he even got a call from Lyndon Baines Johnson. And the message was always the same. Why aren't you being a team player? And, so he was my instructor in the new analyst course. And he was laid out, said, look, this is the kind of pressure.
Hello, David speaking.
Oh, hi there, David. This is Daria calling you.
Okay, hi. I'm actually in the middle of a broadcast right now, so
Oh, my
on my
goodness.
YouTube
Okay.
channel, but
Let's talk another time then.
yeah, I'll call you back afterwards if you don't mind.
Yeah, just send me a text.
Okay, sure.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Okay, bye. Sorry.
Pressure you may come under. And he said,
wow.
he admitted, he said, look, I was in a position, my kids were graduating high school, getting ready to go to college. I didn't have another job to fall back on. So he says there were limits to my bravery, limits to what I could do to take on the system. And so, that happened then. We think, oh, well, that was then. But then we come to your story. Well, like as Yogi Berra said, deja vu all over again, and I guarantee you that's what's going on now with respect to Ukraine.
And Larry, if I can, I talked to you about my time on the ground in Iraq, but I should also mention, at least for a short period of time, my experience in the Pentagon at the time from 2002 through the Iraqi freedom, where we went the initial ground invasion, the war that started in March of that year, 2003. It was evident that the decision had already been made long before, this alleged, when Colin Powell was holding up the vial at the UN and all that, and the diplomatic whatever, it was clear we were already preparing and taking concrete actions to move the tip fiddle. I think you and I talked about on our last show.
Right.
This stuff was moving through, and everything was going through with the clear that we were going in March. Now, to someone who at that time, I think I started off being a captain by the time I got there the first time, on the floor of the Army Operations Center, working all these issues, I naively thought, well, I mean, you got to get these things ready, but then it can be called off at the last minute if diplomacy works.
Right.
But, looking back in retrospect, I can say there was never any intent. It was all a bunch of nonsense. And there's a lot of people that knew that it was always fiction. All the front stuff was just for public consumption, but they had always planned on going in militarily and conquering from the beginning. And it, like you said, it just keeps going. And now then you say here in Afghanistan, here in Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, the lies, the willingness of senior commanders to absolutely lie, and to support false narratives.
Yeah, it's exactly the way the world works. And you mention this to people, and they look like you're turning ahead. It's like Winston Churchill himself said, in war, truth must be surrounded by a bodyguard of lies. We will know whether or not people like me are right when the war ends, and it will end, because you can't. The people are at their breaking point in Ukraine, but yeah.
Whereas, it's sort of the frontline troops are chafing, saying like, what the hell's going on? Because they're the ones that ultimately pay the price for the lies. That's what a lot of people don't understand. How did you first get hooked up with Matthew Ho?
So interesting. So he was stationed or living in Washington D.C. at the time, and when he resigned from
At
the State
which
Department
time?
in 2009.
Okay.
In 2009, he resigned from the State Department over the Obama policies in Afghanistan. And of course, since I had written earlier that year, go deep or go big or go deep, I was already quite interested in it. When I saw that he resigned and that many of the things that he warned about in his resignation letter were the same things I had written in my article. Obviously, I was, I had a kindred spirit, so to speak. But I thought, let me see if I can track him down, because he was all over the news at the time. And somehow I did. I still don't know how I actually succeeded with a flood of people that were meeting. And I said, hey, I'd like to just get together and have a conversation. And so we got together actually at a cafe near one of the metro stops in DC. And we just basically just kind of really hit it off and became really good friends. And that just started a lifelong friendship that we still have to this day. But then we were meeting every other week for a long time before both of us ended up moving and going into different places.
Yeah, because he's been an important voice too, just trying to call out the disaster that's unfolding.
Yeah.
So let me, before we get into talking about the current disaster that's unfolding in Ukraine, do you recall a point in your career where you came to understand how important logistics?
Yeah, this is kind of interesting for me because I'm definitely a logistics professional. I've worked in logistics for over 25 years, and oh yeah, this is what I used to do for a living, and may well do it again.
Is to a combat operation.
Yes, 100%. So Desert Storm was the first time I really saw it, because I watched as everything unfolded for the preparation of Desert Storm. So I was at the Grafenwehr Training Center on a training operation in August 1990. Just doing something normal. I was in part of the 2nd U.S. Cavalry, the Armored Cavalry Regiment, that was at the time doing patrols between East and West Germany, in the border between the Cold War. And all of a sudden, we got this report that Saddam Hussein had invaded Kuwait, and that the United States was preparing to send in light forces to block the border of Saudi Arabia, et cetera. And, there was some concern that we may end up in a conflict. And there was just something in my mind that said, oh, snap, this is going to end up in a war. And my commander, H.R. McMaster at the time, and then Doug McGregor, who was the squadron operations officer, the S3 at the time, also felt the same way. And so we literally started preparing our mental capacities that that's what was going to happen. Well, I watched as we got everything ready. We had to get all of our tanks ready. I mean, physically ready for training. We had to get them repainted to desert color, put them on the boat, to, all that circuitous route that it took to get them there, get them off. And then we flew and embedded in Saudi Arabia at Jabal Air Base or Sea Base. Then we pulled them off. We got them, back recommissioned, ready for combat operations, loaded up. Then we went to the desert. We were training. Meanwhile, all this time, there's just all these boats and airplanes just flying all this equipment, personnel, ammunition, everything else into it. We moved deeper into the desert, et cetera. And then we had this combat operation that, that started in 1991. Now, what I also had done as part of the military preparation for that, we said, what has been done in the past in the history? And so we said, the last big tank battles were the Gazala battles in North Africa during World War II with the Panzer Army Africa and Rommel and all that.
The last big desert tank battles. There's lots more tank battles that are going to happen after Gazla, but he's talking about they are the last big ones in desert combat.
The British 8th Army, et cetera. And one of the things that was clear there is that when we're going through the tactics, we also learned in the process that Germany had basically lost that, not because the British and the U.S. armies were, brilliant and out tactical, but because of the logistics that were cut off, and that cut them down, and that prevented Germany from even getting enough ammunition and weapons to be able to sustain themselves. So eventually, just sheer numbers, the British were able to overcome them, et cetera. Then I'm looking at, what we're doing. I'm going, man, if Saddam Hussein was smart, man, all he would have to do is just take out a lot of these things, or hit us in the ports, or hit us, hit the ships coming down, and he did none of it. He didn't do anything. He didn't interfere.
Yeah, I remember a friend at the time going to, we were just going to college, so it was about 5-6 years after the combat. And he said, why does this Saddam keep going? His problem is he went into Kuwait. He should have kept going into Saudi Arabia before the Americans got there.
Fear in the least with anything we did. And I thought, man, it would have been a lot harder for us if they had done that. But okay, he didn't. Now then, I become the executive officer later in my career of the second the first squadron cavalry regiment of the 1st Armored Division. That was the division cavalry. And so I was the executive officer, and the XO is responsible for logistics. And so you can't fight a war, you can't fight a battle unless you have enough tank rounds, unless you have enough fuel, unless you have enough oil, maintenance, spare parts, obviously the personnel lines, et cetera. So you got to be able to do all those things. So I'm like, wow, this logistics is literally the lifeblood of an operation. If you don't have good logistics, you can't win a fight, no matter how good your tactics may be. So it was really driven home to me during those periods.
Well, how long for that period when you've had to, let's say you started painting the tanks desert camouflage to they got shipped and were on the ground in Saudi Arabia? What time period are we talking about?
Okay, so it was, I can tell you actually, November the 8th of 1990 is when the order came down from the Secretary of Defense. We were all watching it live there, and we literally started the very next morning, and we unloaded the tanks. And I want to say it was on about the 25th or so, somewhere around Christmas of that year. So about a month and a half, I guess, to transit.
Well, that's actually pretty quick. I was anticipating it might have been 3 or 4 months, but
if it from a standpoint, because really, the clock started ticking in August, but because we had already, because of McGregor, et cetera, had already foreseen this, we had already started getting a lot of stuff front loaded and bringing all of our equipment up to full strength, et cetera. So a lot of it started before that. That was just when the official order came down, but we started physical movement from November the 10th, and by around Christmas it was there. So just under 2 months. But
as I've reported in other places on this channel, they mothballed 27 of those ships that would have been moving those that equipment last year because of lack of sailors. So 6 weeks is pretty good, or 6 to 7 weeks is pretty good. But if you don't have the equipment to ship these things anymore,
the whole process was a little bit longer.
How long would a tank operate in combat before it had to be taken out for maintenance? Did it, in asking that, did it match up with what you had trained for prior to this? Did the training match up with what was the combat reality?
Many things did, because because of McGregor and McMaster and several others, we had been trained to a very high degree on realistic conditions. The thing that was different was that we had trained in desert or in the forests and the fields of Europe and the plains, et cetera. And then now here we're in the desert. So that had a big impact on like the fuel filters and the air filters for the tanks. That was a big issue. So those had to be changed a lot more rapidly. But really the maintenance for the tank was about the same one place or the other. And you just had to, just be brutal on doing all of the PMCS checks, they called them, so that you keep the thing operational. And it worked out that way. Everybody wasn't that way. And I'll just give you a quick example. We had, it's called a howitzer battery, HOWBAT. It was a assigned part of the cavalry squadron. And it has 8 guns, self-propelled 109 howitzers. And that's assigned to all 3 of the ground cav squadrons. And ours was, because we had that mentality and that focus, we were all up. And so all 8 guns were operational when the big battle of 7th Eastern came in February of 1991. But there was an assigned a howitzer a battalion that had 24 guns that was attached to the regiment, the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment. And they were at about, I think it was about 65% operational on the day. So I want to say of the 24 guns, I think 8 of them were down on that day because they were not able to keep them mechanically in the fight at the time. So it matters who's doing the training and who's doing the executing on these things, because we were at 100%, they were at like whatever it was, 65%, something like that.
And do you recall when let's call it the digital age entered? If
Okay, I'm going to cut this right here and make this a two-parter. I have a phone call in about 15 minutes, and I don't want to you guys to hear what that conversation is going to be like. So I think this part here with the digital age is pretty good stuff, and we will be covering it later. But I don't want to cut in the middle of that when I have a phone call that I have to take. So I'm going to cut the stream right here. If you like this stuff and want to see more, like, share, subscribe, and we'll get more out there. But for now, this is part one of the Larry Johnson, Daniel Davis interview on Countercurrents and my reaction. So if you want to see more and like this stuff, and please comment as well. That does actually help drive the algorithm as well. And then when I do that, maybe I'll bring in the redacted piece as well. So we'll have two things. We'll do the digital age and the MUFON stuff. Okay, thank you, sir, for checking me out, and I'll see you out there on this channel. Oh, and hopefully maybe I had that AI generated intro done. Thanks.